Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have another fantastic and incredible and informative episode for you guys today. So sit back and enjoy. And so the big topic today, or the main topic today, is going to be about Candace Owens' magical thinking that pervades the right, pervades the entire political discourse, in fact, and all that stuff. As Candace Owens is in the news a lot lately with her theories on Charlie Kirk's shooting, and now TPUSA is finally issuing a challenge for her to debate her views, and she's refusing to go on due to their stipulations. She's demanding a live video link, whatever. She's basically backed out of the debate that they offered. She wants her own type of debate. I'm going to say she backed out of the debate to defend her stances on the Charlie Kirk assassination. And New England Refugee asked to talk about Candace Owens and her, as he put it, insane ramblings and whether TPUSA can sue her and all that stuff. I'm not quite sure whether they can sue that, but I'm going to just talk about why so many people believe Candace Owens on this story. And then we'll go on into discussing current political discourse and why magical thinking is so prevalent right now. And it's not just about conspiracy theories. It also goes into economic thinking. No one asked any questions about my controversial take in defense of interest rates. Somebody did compliment me on it, but I will discuss that a little bit in the main segment because it does relate to the conspiracy theories that people believe. Is that people in our sphere, and it's not just our sphere, it's also woke, that people invent a type of fantasy about life. And then they demand that real life accommodate that fantasy. And this is mainly true with woke. Woke, imagines that men can be women, that systemic racism pervades our entire justice system, that, we stole, that's not really fantasy to say we stole Indian land, it's just wrong. And numerous other things. And that whiteness is a cancer in society and all these type of delusions, and then imposed it on society. And eventually we got tired of it, and it's moderated a little bit since then. It's been in retreat, but people push against it. But the right has its own magical thinking that applies to several areas. It applies to when we're thinking about events. We can't just look at events with actual facts and data, with what's actually before our eyes. We instead choose to invent wild conspiracy theories in order to better entertain our audiences, which is why Candace Owens is so popular. Is that it's very boring, or not very boring, but it is more boring to just state the facts to people of the situation that happened in Kirk. Kirk was obviously killed by a deranged, trans-loving leftist. Those facts are well established. Maybe he had some people who were encouraging him to help do this type of shooting or offering him advice, and hopefully those people are brought to justice. But Tyler Robinson is the shooter. He admitted this to his parents, admitted it to his trans lover or roommate, whatever you want to call it. There's video footage of it. You're basically being told to say what you see before your eyes is wrong. Is that there might have been somebody hidden under a trapdoor under the Charlie Kirk stand who shot him, or that there's some secret shooter in the crowd, even though there have been hundreds of people to witness that person. And they would have, it's not like somebody just shoots someone in the crowd and they're like, oh, wow, we didn't notice it. But it's all much more entertaining to imagine these things than it is to look at the truth. And that's how Candace Owens is popular, is that she's offering a more exciting theory on Charlie Kirk's assassination, because the real story of it is deeply uncomfortable. And I've talked about this, why conspiracy theories are popular, is that we really don't like the idea that just some random person or random accident can just shape history. It's very, very, we don't like that because it establishes a degree or a lack of control that we have over our lives and we have over events and we have over our society that we don't like. We want to imagine that there is this cabal or highly organized network that's in control, and they don't allow things to happen without their approval. So some big event like Kirk being assassinated, or even the Trump attempted assassination, we have to believe that there's some other more powerful force rather than a random individual. Because we really don't like that idea. It's too much chaos. We don't want to think that just some random person can change history like that. And we have to believe that there's something that. So it's more comfortable to have these conspiracy theories, to imagine that someone's in control, that it's not just a Wild West out there. Two, it's also more entertaining, is that they want like a new, they want to watch this as like a TV series. This is how, instead of watching some TV show about an elaborate murder mystery or, some spy thriller, they instead apply those standards, those plot narrative to real world events. And so they want that from their influencers. And that's what Candace is that there's like every episode is like a new plot twist. And it's a new narrative. And it's like, wow, this conspiracy goes deeper than we could ever imagine. There's something new. And the something new is there's allegedly Egyptian military jets going on. She didn't realize that UTC does not mean Utah time and other things. But it doesn't matter for her audience because they want to believe. And because it's more entertaining to believe, and they also want to think that they have the real knowledge of the truth that's being hidden. And that's something powerful with Americans. As Americans, like to have this, all right, it's probably with all people, is that they want to be in on secret or hidden knowledge that other people don't. And these sheeple just are too dumb and too deluded to know. And Candace invites people in there, and with it, exciting plot twists and she has a lot of charisma, and she has the personality to win over a lot of conservatives, particularly suburban moms. Conservatives give deference to any black person or really any minority that is a conservative because they wish there were more minority conservatives, and Candace's career has been a benefit to that. I mean, she is a lot more charismatic and talented at speaking and communicating than a lot of her the other black conservatives. But she is a thing because she's black. She also has talent beyond that. There's a lot of black conservatives that they're only there because they're black. She's the biggest one because of her talent level, but she primarily had people paying attention towards her because she's black. But she adds other characteristics. She's like, I'm just a devout Christian mom. Taking my kids to soccer practice. I think Fuentes and some other people have made fun of her with this. It's like, oh, I'm too busy to follow the news. I'm, taking my kids to the doctor. I just don't have time. But I've suddenly discovered this conspiracy theory about my friend. And I'm the only one truthful to say this. And that background, that credential of her just being a devout Christian mom who's just too busy to follow the news, but just knows the truth when she sees it, that brings people in to want to believe her. Because they like the idea of this is just some ordinary, she's not an average Joe, she's a woman, but average Josie, average Josie is out there finding out the truth, and that others are just following the government line and the line of their handlers, and she's breaking free. She's unchained. You can't put her on the plantation anymore. So they want to follow along with that. And she also makes her conspiracy theory around Charlie Kirk as a matter of faith. I don't want to say this is so much that it's like, well, this is part of her faith or Christian faith or whatever, but it's appealing to a similar type of nature. Is that saying that the doubters and skeptics who are allied with libtarded facts and logic want to deny the deeper truth that's going on here. And the way she says that her main evidence for saying that Charlie Kirk was murdered by, an alliance of TPUSA, Israel, and apparently Egypt, is from a dream that she had, which is a revelation, which for a lot of people they would say, well, that's pretty crazy. But for others, that's like, wow, that is better evidence than any concrete facts and logic that those readers could propose. That's a revelation. That's something supernatural. That's something deep and spiritual. And you can't question that. And a lot of times when you see people defending her, it is like, they're like, that's not true. That's the facts don't align with that. People will say, you're questioning her faith. You're questioning her truth. How dare you do that? That's really insulting. And people have this type of, it creates a defense for these insane ramblings by saying that this is part of my faith. This was revealed to me, and to question in a dream, and to question that is just outrageous and potentially even anti-Christian. There is some element with that, which they don't try to go full bore with the appeal to saying that, like, if you're a Christian, you need to believe this. There's the implication with some of the arguments that they're making that this is a matter of faith, that this is a matter of the supernatural, this is a matter of revelation that she had in her dream that you can't comprehend with your facts and logic. They do make that implication, and for a lot of the right, that's a more persuasive argument than anything else. There's a lot of our side, if I ever rely on polls or data, like, our side gets really mad, and they're like, how dare you rely on a poll? But if I just said, like, you know what, I got in a dream that Zoomers are based, then they'd be like, that is unquestionable logic. That is true, because they prefer supernatural explanations for things. It's why, our whole side is into, demon posting and all this stuff, is because, they want to indulge in the irrational. They want to make things more exciting, and they think that rationality and reason is something the purview of libtards and Redditors. So they want to go in the opposite direction of tribal superstition and stuff. It's, you can go to an African tribe and they think that, like, witches are flying around, and they'll stone people for walking a weird way because they might think that's like demonic possession. And people on our side are like, that is really a good point. We need to follow this along. They're not relying on facts and data. They're relying on their dreams and revelation, like Candace Owens is. And so when that's something, and it is insulting to people's faith, when you're, imagining your entire, view of the universe and life itself, and then you're trying to exploit that understanding to apply to contemporary events, and then advocate for completely brain dead, insane ideas. And then when confronted about that with the facts and data, you then say, like, you're just a non-believer. You don't have the depth to understand this revelation that Candace Owens experienced. So I do think, and it's something that, when people criticize a lot of my take on demon posting, how I'm not a fan of it, and how I also wrote an article about the deep desire for rationalism. People criticize that. They're like, well, we've spent too much time with rationalism. It's time to start talking about demons. And then a lot of these people who make this argument will then admit that, Candace Owens and a lot of people who are going crazy with the Charlie Kirk stuff are going too far out. But it's part of the same picture. It's part of the same tendency, same outlook. If you, want to blame, black crime or mass immigration or just any type of, even woke teachings on demonic possession, which, if you want to think that, like, some of these people are demonically possessed, I guess that's fine. I mean, that's your personal opinion, but I don't think that should stand as our primary explanation for it. I think we can explain that with looking at what they're actually saying and doing without having to resort to the supernatural. But, if you want to believe there's a supernatural element, it's a free country. You can believe that. People will do that. That's whatever. But if once people start doing that as their primary explanation, then that leads to people just wanting to make up shit about any type of event. And there's also a financial incentive to do this. Maybe that's not the best way financial, is that Candace could be losing Actually, I don't think she's losing any sponsorship. She's gaining audience, which probably is financial. But it's more of trying to catch a bigger audience, a larger audience, more than maybe so much finances. But by having a larger audience, you're able to remain as a stable, large podcast. And she's getting huge right now. With her takes, even though a lot of stuff about, Brigitte Macron being a man, which that's another matter of faith. That's like saying, it's like, they've proven in court that she's not a man. She's not a man. But then, like, the faith is like, they look at Candace like a prophet, that she's in touch with, a higher level of understanding with this. It's like a cult with this. And some of the people, I've had some people, I'm going sidetrack. I'm from the original point, but I'll go back to that cult point with in a moment. But just to finish up that other point, the demon posting, irrationalism, just conspiracy theories, they're all on the same picture. And this sometimes it's just frivolous and harmless, like talking about UFOs flying around. It might be type of stupid, but it's not really harmful. It's not really distracting the right from other things. This situation does distract from the right, because we had this narrative that the left killed Charlie Kirk. Their rhetoric, their heightened rhetoric against Trump, against Kirk, against Trump supporters, against right-wingers in general, is why Kirk is dead, is that they feel it's necessary to enact violence against us to achieve their goals. We had this clear narrative that helps the right with us. But instead, this story has been used to tear the right apart and show how idiotic it is, because we can't look at facts in the face, and we can't just come together to understand a shared reality. Our side needs entertainment, wants to maximize entertainment, and it wants a hidden truth to all events that you're not supposed to know. And it cannot just go along with the narrative, because it doesn't increase viewership to do so. And so it becomes a problem. Instead of actually becoming a new way to own the left, it becomes a new way to own ourselves and make ourselves look stupid. And it becomes deeply unappealing to anyone with an IQ above 100. So we are left with like absolute idiots. It's that people want to think that we're like the high IQ people. And like there was this J6er who gave this short rant over the weekend, and is like, if teachers can't teach every subject, why do we expect the kids to learn every subject? And the guy's like, I said what I said. And it's like, this is some of the dumbest shit you could ever imagine. And this is a lot of the audience for this. This is not like, people imagine that it's all 140 IQ people taking into this, and maybe some of them is, but a lot of it is these guys who can't understand basic economics, can't understand that like you need to pay property. It's like why we have so many stupid ideas floating around, like people being incapable of understanding interest rates and motivation and the actual motivations to getting people to lend money so you can buy things. People can't understand that. And a lot of our side thinks like money grows on trees. We should ban banks and loans, and then everyone will have a house, because apparently a certain regime in Germany did this, but they forget that in Germany they actually had interest-based loans as well. That's like probably the funniest thing is that, all these guys rely on this, they need to have concrete examples. And then, the one regime they have to example, this is of course not an endorsement, obviously, but they, their one example, they also had loans with interest. They also had lending with interest in that state. And people would have otherwise not been able to buy things there. But also there's a lot of other factors going on in that, but that's a separate topic. But, if their main point is like, we shouldn't have interest, we shouldn't have banks, we shouldn't have all this, and then their one regime had all these things as well. But people just live in fantasy land. I make this point all the time, and this becomes a problem when we are trying to assess political events and then create a solution with it. And, people have complained that, the right was supposed to go after Antifa and, start making mass arrests. Which, it's tough with our legal system to do that, and people have a tough time suggesting who they want mass arrests of. I mean, they are coming down a lot harder on Antifa. It is unprecedented that we now have foreign Antifa groups on the terror list. That's a big deal. And the government is, looking into these groups far more than they did in the first term, which is when they should have. You're not having mass arrests, but there's progress being made, and I think it's more of the entertainment values that they want to see, like, Hakeem Jeffries in handcuffs for something, which is just not going to happen. And some of this stuff is like, oh, they should have Hassan Piker arrested for spewing violence. Well, if they're arresting him for his violent rhetoric, they'd be arresting a lot of right-wingers, because half the right-wingers are like, oh, this guy threatens violence, and then they have, like, tons of posts about what they would do in a civil war and their terrorism activity. So it's like, that would probably not look well if we're starting to apply this legal standard. Regardless, I think people have been a little unrealistic in their expectations, but it's useful to have the right unified on blaming the left for the shooting, and then imposing guilt on them and to undermine them as to when we have debates with them, is like, this is the exact same rhetoric that killed Charlie Kirk, and that you're the ones that are promoting violence, not the right. Instead, our side tears itself apart over, these insane conspiracy theories. But it goes along with the insane clown party mindset, is that a big reason why the right has a huge influence over the internet space is that we are more interested in providing entertainment to the audience. And you have to do that when you're a content creator. I mean, you can't just be boring and droning on about, some obscure 19th century thinker or something. You have to make things exciting and interesting. But the things that are most exciting and interesting, for the lowest common denominator, are these idiotic conspiracy theories. And so people go along with them, and it becomes a matter of faith for people. And to deny that, is to deny their faith, which I would say is something separate from their actual religious faith, but it's appealing to the same to the same feelings and sentiments of that, and it becomes kind of you could maybe say an addition to their religious faith, or even a substitute for the religious faith, to believe in this stuff. And that goes along with my point about the cults, is that I've always had people wonder, is like, with the insane state of America, how do we not have more cults popping up? Well, we have that with podcasts. Is that a lot of the relationship with the podcast is, cult-like, is that this person, like Candace Owens, is a prophet. And she has a deeper understanding than anyone else. And whatever she says is the truth. It becomes a type of relationship with some of these podcasters that is like with a cult leader. Some people would say that with me, but my audience is like in revolt all the time. If I had a cult, like the building would be set afire every day when I say, we have to have interest rates. And they're like, no, we don't. And they're like smashing everything. I don't know if I have full control of my cult. And if I ever look at my comments, they're always like nitpicking my random points and stuff. So I don't know if I'm a very effective cult leader or with this. We do want people with a Greer. I even can't get people to get on board with the new Greer pledge. They get mad and they demand the old one back. So I don't know if I have that, but that's probably for the best. I want free thinkers, not mindless slaves. But that's how it goes with the relationship with a lot of these podcasters and their audience is like that with a cult and their following. And that's how Candace is so big. It's like, this is, in a way, a surrogate faith for them. And she appeals to it, and she loves to appeal with, her Christian faith is like, well, I was praying over this and all this, and this is what the truth is. And to attack me is to attack my faith. And she often makes this type of argument. And that's a powerful argument for a lot of the audience that we have now. And it's why a lot of people are defending her. Some people, they have like friendship with her or, whatever, that's why she's in it. But it is this. And this does have like personal like consequences, like these guys at TPSA, like Blake Neff and all these guys now are having like these insane stalkers and like all these like libelous claims met against them. And just imagine you're like a normal person who did nothing wrong. You watched your friend get murdered right in front of your eyes. And now you have thousands of crazy people on the internet falsely accusing you of murder. And it creates a real world situation where it's like, it's wrong to do that. And for a lot of our side, a lot of our side thinks that we should liberalize libel laws to allow people to sue papers for calling you racist. But at the same time, they think that they should be completely protected from genuine libel. Like if you loosen libel laws so somebody could say, well, calling me a racist is defamatory, even if they could have views that could be considered racist. What do you think's going to happen to right-wing media when it goes along with all these insane accusations and delusional conspiracy theories? So there's like a personal consequence to this, and I think it's wrong to do so, and to claim like, well, I'm standing up for my friend or whatever, and you're actually genuinely hurting people. I don't think that's very right. I don't think that's morally upstanding. But the cults demand that. And so that's how it goes along with this. And another point with a cult mindset before I wrap up this discussion is that it's perfectly suited for what people are now. Is that boomers who got in a lot of cults, in the 60s and 70s, I'd probably say the boomers were the most likely. It's probably maybe side of the generation, kind of those people, it was a lot of the cults in like 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were more willing to have a full commitment. And to join a cult, that's like a big commitment. You've got to move somewhere. You've got to be subjected to this authority of the cult. It's a big commitment. That's not just some leisurely activity you can be into. It's not a hobby. You are shaping your entire life around. Today, people don't want to make that full commitment. People are very commitment-phobic in our society. So this makes it easier for them, with the podcaster cult. If you maybe think that if they try to dictate your life and how you live it, they're not going to follow along with that. But they can pretend they're following along with the cult online, with their online persona and how they interact with on the internet. But in their real life, they can live in a completely different way. It's like, it's similar with some of the stuff with it coming from the old white nationalists that they'll inveigh against racial mixing and you need to stick with your own people, and then they've got like a non-white wife and stuff. Like the Return of Land guy was complaining that like he's getting a ton of applications from guys with non-white wives, and so it goes along with this why the kind of podcaster cults work now is it doesn't require you to change your life or to make an intense commitment outside of the internet, is that you're able to casually commit yourself to this cult without having to overturn your life, which an old cult you would have to cut off your family, friends, move completely different location, quit your job, do all that. You don't have to do that with the podcasters. You just have to have faith in them, and you just have to support them on the internet. And that's why Candace is big, is that a lot of the podcasters you have to have build up. It's very different from like Rogan. I don't think people were having a cult around Rogan, but a lot of the newer ones, you have to have a cult around it. And maybe that's just a thing with politics, is that there's always been, personality cult with that. I mean, look at what Trump is. MAGA is also a personality cult as well, but it's also, it has real world political consequences. It has, people getting elected. It has policy changing. It has a lot of other things. And maybe some people might think it goes a little too far. I mean, some of the stuff, the Trump personality cult stuff, does go a little far. But I mean, it's a normal part of the political process. It's a little bit different with the entertainment process for people to build up cults around it. I mean, you've had that with teenagers and rock bands, but now, the era of rock bands and popular musicians are over, at least for men. And now it's become with podcasters when you have a wider age demographic. So just to conclude, it's necessary for the right to start standing up to this magical thinking. I have an article tomorrow calling for the need for realism. And that's really what we need to be. We need to be realism. Is that the truth is on our side. You don't need to make up conspiracy theories and imagine dreams to defend our side. The facts are on our side. We know race realism is correct. We know we need immigration restriction because the data tells us. We know socialism sucks because the data tells them. And I do think we need to be anti-social. That's another matter on the economics. I didn't have enough time to go on the economics, but we'll talk about that later. Maybe in the mailbag, people will ask me economic questions about interest rates and whatever. But we know that. We know the woke is evil. Because we see what they teach kids in school. You don't need to make up a conspiracy theory about it. And the list goes on. If our side, people like the dissident right, made itself out as an appealing political formation because it had the willingness and the balls to speak truth to power. And its greatest attribute was having that truth that is clearly seen, that can be clearly seen in the real world. But due to political correctness, the people refuse to see what's right before their eyes. Now instead of having people look at the world as it actually is, free of political correctness, free of some woke school marm threatening your job and threatening your livelihood, and having the willingness to see what's right before your eyes, we're instead inventing an alternate reality where we are denying what's right before our eyes in favor of some kooky explanation that's a lot more entertaining. And I think this is going to have problems with the right politically. It's going to be devastating for our side because people do not want to vote for the kooky people who think that their shoes are untied because a demon untied them rather than they didn't tie their shoes. They forgot to tie their shoes. People don't want to vote for this. And it allows the left to present itself as the sensible moderates, which we all know they're not. But, Gavin Newsom would love for our side to turn into like Candace Owens, and for him to run in 2028 is to say the other people are these insane loons that you wouldn't want to even invite to, you wouldn't even want to be in the same shopping center with, versus me, which is a rational, sensible moderate, which they know they're not. So, and our side is just going to attract continuing morons and be incapable of addressing real world events and current events with actual plans and ideas. Instead, we're just going to retreat into fantasy land to entertain our increasingly dumber audience. So that's why I'm opposed to it. So that is my opening lecture today. So we got about 30 minutes into it. So be a little bit controversial. I actually have one thought on Candace Owens. There we go. I've praised Candace Owens in the past, and I think Candace Owens has done good things. I mean, yes, she got a big thing because she's base black conservative. But unlike pretty much every other conservative, she was the first to come out against George Floyd. And it was her and Tucker Carlson. She made a viral video on Facebook that was the first to reveal the truth about George Floyd. And she's done a lot of other good things on immigration, on questioning America's undying support for Israel and other things. But really what she's doing now is turning us into helping encourage insane clown populism and wanting to turn our movement into a circus rather than a movement dedicated to changing the world. And that's something we have to acknowledge. So we're going to move on to other questions. We've got a good one from Myopic Eeyore, which this could be a IQ supplement. He wanted this to maybe be a whole IQ supplement. He said, we discussed a new national security strategy on the main show. It's very interesting, and its language is a big is a big riposte to online blackpillers who are down on Trump. If you needed more material to make it a full IQ supplement, you could contrast the new one with Jake Sullivan's speech on the old one from 2023. Yeah, comparing it with the Jake Sullivan speech is a little bit beyond the show, but it is a very good national security strategy, and it highlights how different this second term is from the first term. They would have never revealed this in the first term. In the first term, they were operating the same damn foreign policy strategy that we always were. You know, you had H.R. McMaster and Pompeo and Bolton handling national security strategy. The only reason that we did anything sensible in national security strategy is because Trump had usually solid instincts that went against his own advisors. But now our national security strategy is laid out in a way that is strongly identitarian, strongly nationalist, that is no longer caring about this stupid human rights agenda that we've had since we've had since Jimmy Carter. We're instead focusing on the national interest, and we're encouraging Europe to limit immigration and to build itself up so it can take care of itself. And I think the reaction from European libtards highlights how good of a policy it is. Now, and also that we're not going to worry about the human rights abuses of authoritarian governments. We're going to work with them because we're approaching the world with realism, as we should with our domestic policies. Is that I really am, when discussing what I am politically, I've decided that I like the term realist. I think it's different from the international. You know, it doesn't mean entirely what it on the international or international relations. It's something that's different. The article I have coming out talks about it a little bit. I'll have tomorrow, but I really like describing myself as a realist more than anything else, more than conservative, more than nationalist, more than identitarian, certainly more than paleoconservative, which I don't like calling myself. But yeah, I think that's, it's a realist approach to the world, and it's upholding the national interest as opposed to what it was doing with Jake Sullivan and on past foreign policy. Jake Sullivan was Biden's national security advisor. And what Jake Sullivan did is that we need to develop all these countries and ensure they respect human rights more, but don't take any Chinese money. So it's like a reason why a lot of these countries prefer China is that China leaves them the hell alone on how to govern themselves. Meanwhile, we're like, are you guys respecting trans rights? And this gets annoying for a lot of these countries. So, no, it's awesome. I think it's a great strategy. I think it's a great strategy. It's something that we would have wanted any administration to propose. It shows that they're serious about, changing the trajectory of how America acts on the global stage. I mean, we can see that with them actually trying to reach a peace deal in Ukraine that has a chance of being agreed to by Russia and other things. I mean, there's still problems, with Israel and some other things, but we're working towards a better foreign policy here, and I think that's indicated by the national security strategy. So, a lot of other people have discussed it at length, but I'm very positive about it. I think it's great, and it's another sign of how different and much better the second term is compared to the first. So that's a question today. And then question from Aldi Wine Commissar. He said, what do you make of the efforts to direct Zoomer political activity away from bad actors, right-wing influencers and others towards youth pastor nationalism? The kind of radical activity that is about praying, servant leadership, and family formation. Is this trend here to stay, or will most men see it for what it is, a boomer longhouse, and reject it outright? Well, family formation does make people more conservative, and it's understandable for conservatives to want to encourage it, especially with women. As, when you become into a family and you have a house, you focus on direct practical things that are as relevant to your family, and you generally become conservative. You don't like crime. You don't like taxes. You care about what your kids are learning. You don't like wokeness in schools. So it does have a conservative impact. But it also makes people very also beholden to the status quo at the same time. Because they're also become, their main concern is supporting their family. And radical changes may impact that. And also they worry about, they can't put their job at risk. They for good reason they become much more risk averse when you're in a family. And a lot of people on our side try to deny that and they get angry with it. It's like, well, you don't have a family and all the things. Well, that's true, but you also have to admit when you are the head of the family, you're not going to do things that are risk unemployment and risk reputational damage. Because wives primarily care about ensuring you maintain a good reputation and you maintain a good income. Because they do not want to be the wife of the neighborhood racist or the wife of the unemployed racist, more importantly. And there was a ton of divorces from these old right guys who got doxxed and they lost, their jobs and stuff, and then their wives left them. There's a lot of stories about this. It's something that's not discussed a lot because, it's a personal issue for a lot of people, but, it happened to a lot of people. And so the way that people try to make it out, but, guys, they get, they feel, I'm trying to think of the word. I'm trying to not be too harsh, but, they still want to view themselves as a virile young man and they want to see themselves as like a radical and dangerous young man, still full of energy and still full of verve and all that. And, driving around the minivan with your kids, it's not the most, it doesn't really jive with that impression. So a lot of these guys then try to turn this into radicalism, as that this is the new guerrilla form. I wrote about this last year with the incoherence of wife guy radicalism, where these guys we're rejecting the modern world by becoming wife guys and driving our kids to soccer practice, which is like a good thing you should do as a father, but you're not a revolutionary by doing that. Now, whether you should want to be a revolutionary, that's another matter, but it's a way to make it seem more exciting than it actually is. When it's just not a political choice. It's just what you do as a person to build up a family and then support them. But it does make you much more supportive of the status quo and much more hesitant to support radicalism, because that might threaten your ability to support your family. So for understandable reason. But conservatives, so both sides try to promote this. Even the type of radicals, even though I don't want to say, some influencers will make points about this, like Fuentes and BAP, even though they are obviously don't like each other. They both are aware that this is that strategy is not going to lead to political radicalism, but a lot of other influencers do, and so they both pitch this. And so some of the people who pitch it are the standard conservatives, like the Brad Wilcox types, and who are just want everyone to be a wife guy, and then they think it's going to create a more conservative, status quo oriented right, and it'll make people more normal, so to speak. And then there's the other side, which thinks that this is going to create tons of urban guerrillas, that they're going to drop their kids off to soccer practice and then they're going to put their mask on and go take out the globalists or something. So that through these type of activities. But yeah, no, the conservatives have always advocated for this stuff. I remember a decade ago when the alt-right first emerged, that they were like, really what we need to get is these guys in church. Well, the new formations of the dissident right are a lot more religious than they were in the alt-right days. They are going to church, but in some ways it's making them more extreme than they were back then. But people still advocate this. Like, I saw a Dana Lash article where it's like, we need to get these guys in church. We need to get these grapers in church. I'm like, the grapers are big into going to church. Well, I mean, they're wanting to do that. I don't think that's really solving your problem here. So they still advocate for the same stuff because they want... There's an understandable reason for this, and then there's a type of cuck reason. Is that the understandable reason is that they do want people to, settle down a bit and not be too insane. And I just had my first opening segment on this, where it's like magical thinking, Which I think if you had radicalism without magical thinking, which debatably some of the alt-right was, but the alt-right had a ton of goofiness and a lot of silliness, and it came out in 2017. But it also was probably had a lot less of the type of magical cult thinking that's prevalent on the right now. But in any case, the understandable reason is it wants these guys not to go insane and to be productive, healthy members of society. And that's part of just like getting married and having kids. But then they start advocating this as the political solution to all your problems. And it's sometimes used as a way to ignore the real problems in society of demographic change, anti-white racism, the increasing uglification of America, other things. And instead it just says, well, you just need to focus on your family and praying, and that's it. That you don't why are you worried about this stuff? Stop worrying about this stuff. Just focus on what you can control. And they often make, and a lot of these conservatives make that argument. That's where when it becomes a problem. I think you need to separate what we are about politically and then our personal life advice. Is that personal decisions that might be good are not like political or revolutionary decisions. Like having a family is not a revolutionary act. It's a good act. It's what you should strive for, but it's not a revolutionary act. And it's also going to make you both more conservative, but less willing to rock the boat. Good and bad. It's mainly good for the women, and maybe it makes men avoid some bad behavior, but that's the fact of it. At the same time, you need to have a politics that can appeal to both wife guys, young guys who feel that they can achieve the American dream, and older people who are able to transcend their selfishness and have more care about things or other things more than not trying to pay their property taxes and ensuring they get more benefits from the government. And so you want a broad-based coalition that you can win over and appeal to. And most of the people we're going to get are these young guys who feel that the American dream is unattainable, and they get pissed off when older conservatives who got theirs then arrogantly tell them, like, well, you just need to do what I did, when it's much harder for them to do what they did as a 22-year-old versus it was 20 years ago. So there's that. I think it's fine advice for personal life, if how you want to, what personal objectives you want to achieve, but it's becomes a problem when that becomes a political solution. As it's about encouraging you to ignore the real matters and just focus on yourself and to not care about demographic change. Just all you need to care about is getting your kids to soccer practice, which, that's not going to solve all things. That'll make you a good dad, but that's not going to solve our political problems. So that's a good question. Then Dollar Bill has a very interesting question. This is kind of dealing with some of the interest or the loan debate. He said, "You have said in the past that bread and circuses are necessary because the American public if the American public is deprived of them, they turn into left-wing radicals who support Black Lives Matter and riot in the streets. Does this mean that the NFL and FanDuel are the two national bulwarks preventing America from spiraling into violent social justice chaos?" I think sports are. I did argue that in my article about in the Civil War, that you have to appreciate bread and circuses, because the thing we have to understand is a lot of people are stupid. All right? Not everyone's going to get into philosophy. I actually think that fewer people should read philosophy, because I think it's making a lot of guys choose to read philosophy rather than history or understand basic economics and law, and it makes them get silly ideas. But they're not going to be in the same things as us. They want amusements, and if they don't have amusements, they're going to have a lot of time in their hands, and they're going to be putty in the hands of left-wing agitators. And that's how we got Black Lives Matter riots. So it's good that they have amusements to distract them from all the things and to not care about social justice. I I think sports are fine. I think the betting is a bit different because it's too much of a vice. And a way some people were making this argument about loans and saying, well, this is bad because of look at sports betting. Well, sports betting is a problem because you are taking out loans for something completely unproductive. You're not taking out a loan to buy a car or start a business or own or to buy a house or even to buy things you need or even to pay for a college education, which we can debate over the merits of it. But there is like a utility to that. There is no utility for placing bets. It's essentially taking out a loan to buy drugs. Same thing. And I think there is a need to limit vices. And I think sports betting is getting out of hand with that. But just having sports and something to distract people and to focus on, it's fine. I think there's a lot of guys on our side that they would be better off focusing on sports than politics. Because I see like some of these posts, I'm like, man, this is really deranged. I don't think this is becoming a positive thing for your society. It'd be much better if you focus on like the Jets or something. Maybe not the Jets. Maybe a team that's better. Maybe like the Patriots, rather than focusing on this. And I see people just spiral out over this stuff. But I just imagine all the normies who then, if they don't have sports, then spiral out over George Floyd and systemic racism and stuff. So yeah, I would say NFL is a national bulwark preventing America from spiraling into violent social justice chaos, but I would not say that about FanDuel. So we've got a lot more questions. Let's see if we got any newer ones. Some people send them late because I record these a little bit earlier than I did in the past, but we've got questions from K-Max. At least one question. No, he's just got one question. He said, the N-word's power in American life. In 2 incidents this week, it proved more powerful than physical violence. A Cinnabon employee was fired over it, and a Portland jury cleared a black man of assault because the white man he sat at said the N-word. I found the Portland story to be more outrageous, but your thoughts on these two stories? Well, it's obviously more outrageous. I mean, generally, you can't be a service worker and yell the N-word at people. I think that here, I really don't like setting the example that if you are a prick to somebody and then you have a argument with them, that then you can ruin their life by pulling out your phone and only seeing them melting down. And that's what happened with the Shiloh Hendricks case, is that we didn't see the story about the Somali kids harassing her kid and threatening her kid. And we didn't see that this Somali guy was like harassing her and trying to get her to say that word on screen. So we only get the perspective of her accusers. And this is likely the same with a Cinnabon employee, is that these people were likely doing something wrong that pissed her off. And, she's having a rough day. She is a woman who maybe doesn't have the greatest impulse control based on her. She's got a criminal history and drug abuse problems. And so she just went off on him. Granted, probably even if there was no video camera or video footage of it, you'd probably be fired for going off on employees if they hear about it. So it is what it is. But I don't think that we should be turning these people into the devils of the day and to like ruin their lives. I mean, this is a woman who's, working class woman. I think she's in her 40s and working at Cinnabon. Like, this is not a person with any power. And this is why woke, was awful, is that it would just go up to these ordinary people. You could be a house painter and have your life ruined over just some comment that someone recorded. And it's the same here. You probably shouldn't go, as I said, you probably shouldn't go off on customers, even if they're outrageous. And I think it's worth noting that the Somalis she was interacting with probably caused her to go off, and they were probably in the wrong, but it's why you don't do this. It's even the same with that Scotland story, where it's like the migrant goes up to the Scottish girl and he sees her holding the knives, and it's like we don't see the rest of the story. So I really don't like empowering these people, and you should never say that they're in the right. They're usually in the wrong, and they're always doing this to lead a internet hate mob against the person that they likely incited into saying something rude. Now, completely different story or not a completely different story, but the Portland story is completely outrageous. Is that the guy said the N-word after he was stabbed, not before. So there was no grounds for attacking him. And from what this story is the guy came over with a knife. Now, hilariously, his defense attorney said, well, the only reason he would come over with a knife is he was trying to trade him for something. And it's like, no person goes up to another man. No man goes up to another man carrying a knife without ill purpose. And obviously the white guy obviously felt threatened for a good reason. And this guy, I think this guy has like a criminal record or whatever. And he's like, he confronts it. And then this defense was like, well, there was racism, he said, but there's no evidence that he uttered anything racist. Likely this guy came up to try to rob him. This guy, the white guy's pretty big, might know how to fight, decided to challenge him, and he got stabbed for it. And then, when you get stabbed, you're fucking angry, so you're probably going to say the N-word. But then the fact is, it's like we're punishing the guy for being angry that he just got stabbed when he's just waiting for I think the bus or the train. It's outrageous. No, this story is one of the most outrageous because it's even worse than these other stories. Because there's been a lot of stories where a guy's been was able to get off for even killing a white person for saying the N-word. There was a story of, I think it was at a Dunkin' Donuts, a black worker went out and sucker punched a white guy who said the N-word. The guy hit his head and he died. And I think he either got like a very lenient like misdemeanor charge or the charges were cleared. There's another story in Florida where a black guy murdered his tutor because he claimed the guy said they got into some argument over payments and then he killed him. And prosecutors dropped charges because they thought a jury would never find him guilty. And there's been a ton of cases like this. But in all these cases, the victim said the N-word before. So maybe you could say, oh, it's fighting words. And, if you would punch a guy over that, maybe you have a chance. I mean, there is something about fighting words and instigating things. Something like with these Somalis with the Cinnabon employee. But saying it after the fact is it is really egregious. Now, there was a story, it was from Ohio. I think it was either Ohio or Kentucky. This is like a decade ago, where a judge gave a lenient sentence to a black home invader. Because it was a black judge. And he did this because the family, they had a young child and who had experienced this traumatic event, said that the child is now scared around black guys because of this event. And the judge went on a self-righteous lecture against the family and then gave the guy a lenient sentence. So that's one of the few times where it'd be racial sentiment after the fact allow the criminal to get off. So no, it's one of the most egregious cases I've ever witnessed, but it's how our courts work in these blue cities. I'm not surprised that Portland would do this. This would happen in a lot of other cities, which is unfortunate. So hopefully we can, I don't know if we can get federal charges for the guy, but it would be great if we did. Problem is that it would probably also have to deal with a Portland jury in that case. Max Zoid has a question. He said, if you could magically and instantly learn any language, but it had to be one of little economic utility and with only a couple million speakers, what would it be? Either Norwegian or Swedish. Probably Norwegian. Yeah, he mentioned that it would be for, understand black metal lyrics. It's also, you could read Knut Hamsun and some other, they got some great writers. So Sweden might have a little bit more literature and TV shows and movies to understand than with Norwegian. But it'd be either one. I will just go with Norwegian. But Swedish would be a close second. Hornets got questions. He said, but did Notre Dame get screwed out of the college football playoff because they are white? Do you agree with Jason Litwack that James Madison and Tulane are the Ketanji Brown Jacksons of college football? Well, I don't think it's so much racial. I mean, Notre Dame's got a black coach that they always love celebrating. So they have a white reputation, but I think it's just the system they have. It's stupid. It is utterly stupid. James Madison, Tulane shouldn't be in there. There's also just stupid thing like the NCAA has to take control over all these conferences. A lot of the conferences now select the best two teams of the conference. It's no longer which team wins the division and the other team. And it became really stupid with the ACC where Virginia, should be playing the college football playoff. They only had 1 or 2 losses. And they played Duke, which has 5 losses. So they obviously can't be in the playoff. And then Duke somehow ends up winning. And ACC had better teams than Duke, but I think it's because they still operate on the whoever is the best team in the division or wins that division gets to play the other one in the division. So it's just utterly ridiculous. Alabama should not be in there. They got their ass beat by Georgia, and they lost to Florida State, which is a terrible team. They should not be in there, but then they're in there. Notre Dame, it's not even so much money because Notre Dame's got a large fan base and they're all pissed off about this. Alabama's got a large fan base too, so that's probably why they put them in there. But it's a ridiculous lineup. James Madison, Tulane should not be in there. But they have these, they did really well in their conferences and they played weak schedules, so and these other teams that are better lost these certain games or didn't win their championship, so they're in there. No, the way it is done is stupid. The 4-team playoff, we knew this was going to happen. They thought this would solve the 4-team playoff. This instead has just made it even dumber and worse. They really need to go back to the 2-team playoff, to just the old BCS system before they even had the playoff where the best 2 teams played. It should be Indiana and Georgia. That's it. They won their championships, and that's it. And also Notre Dame is also showing the bowl season doesn't matter. It's even less important than the NIT. The bowl games are now basically the Pro Bowl. If their players have any shot of going to the NFL, they all sit out the game. It's not even a real game. They barely play the games. It's a joke. Like the bowl season makes no sense. It's even worse than the NIT, which is the conference, the tournament for teams that don't make into March Madness, into the main NCAA college basketball tournament. So it's all dumb. But they're making so much money because it's now all these games. They're making more money off the playoff than they would on bowl season, and so we now have these stupid teams. It's only going to get worse from here. We're gonna be even more pissed off next year with how it ends up. I guarantee it, and it's gonna be like that for the rest of the time. They're never gonna get rid of it because they think they're making more money off it. The second question: what do you think of the impact of the Netflix Warner Bros. Merger will be? Will this have any effect on the wokeness of movies? It's bad. Netflix is still one of the most left-wing big tech companies. And they're going to be owning way too many damn properties and way too much of the entertainment industry. It is really bad. You should not have a total monopoly of the entertainment industry. So Netflix is more inclined to make woke films than others. And also because they have primarily a streaming format, it's harder to be punished for doing woke films. When you put out a film in the theaters and no one goes and sees it, it makes a clear impact that people don't want this shit. But when it's put out in streaming, you can manipulate the algorithm and other things, and people will just and it's less of a commitment. Once again, going to my thing with commitment is that people don't want to make commitments. It's why they don't go to see theaters. Is that, I've got to take, 2.5 hours of my time or 2 hours of my time to go. I've got to pay this ticket. But when you just, coming back from work and going through on the remote on your TV and you're like, well, this movie's being recommended, I'm going to watch it. So Netflix can get people to watch more woke stuff with that. And that's how a lot of people choose stuff. They're like, this is recommended. They say it's good. And then, voila, we're watching some shit woke movie. So I think it's bad. I oppose it. They can't really get any worse. I mean, Hollywood itself realizes they need to walk back from it, but I think it will protect the woke gains that they made in cinema and will have more just absolute dog shit media properties with that type of merger. And they'll be able to, take a lot of beloved franchises and wokeify and diversify it. So, no, I think it's bad. Nitro has a great question. He said, the primary is still a ways out, but what do you but who do you have any thoughts on Florida's upcoming gubernatorial election? I think he's like, what are your thoughts on? But it's okay. Some people, we all have mistakes like that. It'd be embarrassing to be the first state to have a base black man governor. Byron Donalds is no Mark Robinson. On the other hand, you're rightly highlighted James Fishback is a cringeworthy sloppy list. Both are weaker general election candidates than we should be running, especially if things look bad for Republicans going into midterms, and David Jolly is the Democratic candidate. Florida Republicans need a third option. Oh man, I didn't realize I need to double check if David Jolly is going to be there. I'm not surprised that he is. They always try to get these guys to these Republican heretics to run in Democratic primaries there. But yeah, he is running. So he yeah, he might be the guy. that's yeah, that he might actually win. That's actually not good. Jolly probably has gone too much of a never Trumper to be that appealing, because all these Republican heretics, they then go full on. Like, this would be like, Jolly was one of the worst, actually, in terms of like anti-Trump guys. He's been on MSNBC and CNN for since he left office. But yeah, that's maybe he could go to the center and say like, well, I'm a former Republican who's tired of these excesses. The issue is that the Republican primaries between Byron Donalds and James Fishback, he's made his case. It's a complete clown primary. Both of them have their issues. Byron Donalds, he's okay as a congressman. You don't want him running for statewide office. He's got a lot of baggage. He's not that talented a politician. He's not that smart. He is only there because he's a MAGA loyalist, which I think that they should be smarter on these candidates. It's why they told Marjorie Taylor Greene, we're not going to back you for governor or Senate, which is why she's now anti-Trump, because they realized she could not win a statewide office. They should have tried to tell that to Byron Donalds, but Byron Donalds is even more of a Trump loyalist and was seen to have less baggage than Marjorie Taylor Greene. So then they all lined up behind him, and they're like, well, he's a black guy. What baggage could he have? But he has a lot of baggage. I mean, it's happened with Herschel Walker. It's going to be the same thing it's going to be another case of Herschel Walker. I think there's going to be a lot of baggage to come out. And he's not a particularly gifted politician. He's going to have a tough time in a general election. But Fishback is like a whole other category. This guy is, this guy, I don't want to trust this guy to look after my dog for 5 minutes if I had a dog. But I would not trust this guy to do anything. Like, this guy is extremely suspicious. People like say like, well, Vivek is a scammer. Well, Vivek at least made money. This guy didn't even make money. He like left his hedge fund under terrible circumstances, and they sued him, when he left. It's unclear where he's got a lot of financial and legal problems following him around. You don't really know what he believes in, and he's running a campaign entirely centered on X. It's all about X. His whole agenda is shaped by appealing to internet people, not to Floridians. So he is not going to be a serious candidate for governor. And, it's also just, it goes back to like this thing about, I forgot, I didn't mention this about enough with Candace Owens, but Candace is a con artist. She's a bullshitter. She's changed her politics a lot of the time. Sometimes that's to her benefit, like she has the balls to go and call out George Floyd when no one else did, and some other issues. But at the end of the day, she's got the spirit of a con artist. And a lot of our side is susceptible to con artistry. At the same time, we're all like worried about fell for it again, and like, oh, you're trying to fool me, Trump, by wanting to ban third world immigration. I'm not going to fall for this, Mr. Trump. And then they fall for these guys who are the absolute worst snake oil salesmen imaginable. Now, I would hope somebody else, Lord forgive me, but I think the best case for governor would be Casey DeSantis. And it pains me to say this, but Casey DeSantis would actually win would actually win a general election. She would have not many problems. She'd run as a okay governor. I don't like the DeSantises, but, I'm able to see the bigger picture and sacrifice my, I don't have dignity, but my principles to support Casey DeSantis in this picture. If I had to force to choose between these two, I don't like either, but I think at this moment, Byron Donalds has a better chance of winning the general election. Fishback would be lucky to get 40. Man, Fishback would be lucky to get 40%. Most people are going to recognize him for what he is. I don't trust the guy whatsoever. And I don't like how our side... It's not that he's so much a sloppulous. It's that he's got like he's a snake oil salesman. And our side falls for these people all the fucking time. And it's like, our side is insanely gullible and falls for these cults. And like it... they're like, well, I'm not falling for this. It's like, you think I'm going to pay interest on this loan. And then then they sign up for this obvious rug pull of a shit coin. That's the same with like Fishback and his like attitude and mindset and mentality. So I just don't trust the guy whatsoever. Some of the things he says is nice, but I mean, it's like, the average Floridian doesn't care that much about H-1B visas. We should not be banning property taxes and all this other stuff that he's promoting. I mean, it's nice that he's going along with H-1Bs, but I mean, DeSantis is already doing that, but so would Casey do that. So, but if I had to force to choose, just based on keeping that state red, I think Byron Donalds would be better in a primary, in a general election, but I don't like either of them. It's a total clown primary. I'm probably going to write about it at some point, because it does show like the problems of what a post-Trump world would look like, is that you have these guys trying to emulate Trump in their own way, even though Fishback is anti-Trump, but he's a result of the Trump phenomenon. And they try to emulate Trump, and it comes out as a worse version and a less electable version. So, lots of problems. Now with pay-per-view, he's got a quick question saying, how should we on the right treat private equity groups? With how it is negatively viewed, it seems like it could be easily be susceptible to misplaced populism. There are pros and cons with it. It's a fact of our economy now. I think people overstate over how negative of an impact it is, but it can have problems. I mean, a lot of private equity companies, when they buy up these other companies, and then they run them not about, at times they run them not about achieving better services and better qualities products for people. Instead, they just try to milk more profits for them, and then they throw them out after they get them their profits. I don't really think that's the best model, but sometimes they establish good business practices among like chaotic companies that are run by like an independent owner, and they don't focus well on customer service in the first place. It is what it is. It's a very complicated issue. I don't think it's one of our major issues threatening us. I think at times we often turn to blaming private equity for issues that have nothing to do with private equity. But there's still some criticisms to be made about it. I don't think a proper attitude is like, oh, private equity rules. It's a factor of the economy. There are both criticisms and, I don't know if compliments is the word, but positive things you could say about it. But I think people overstate its importance to the negative things we don't like in our society. Renown has questions. I don't know how many questions he has. He has two. Do you think Michael Tracy should get a Pulitzer for debunking the Epstein list hoax? I have to look into that. I don't think he's going to get a Pulitzer. But I support him in his effort to be the ultimate contrarian and to raise questions about Epstein. I think he goes a little too far in the contrarianism on this and saying that he's like he and Maxwell are completely innocent. But he does. It's good that he is one of the few people out there raising questions about it and debunking some of the magical narratives we have about it. And second question, there's been a deluge of messages coming from the Trump administration, the broader Trump camp, that can be labeled at least as white identitarian. Some of these messages are supposedly coming from Rubio's office or underlings. Here's my question for you. What is Marco Rubio's attitude towards white identitarianism? I don't think he has a strong attitude towards it. He knows that the right-wing nationalist stuff is what's popular on the right and builds up his reputation to potentially run for president one day. And he knows that this is the trajectory of American conservatism. When he thought that American conservatism would be embracing amnesty and being diverse and Tea Party-esque, he was into that a decade ago. Now he's into MAGA. So he's just following along. I think he's just okay with this stuff because he feels that this is how to gain status and reputation for himself as a politician. He's a talented politician, and a lot of politicians, they don't have the most solid political principles, but it's good that he's following along with what we like. But I don't know. He thinks it's good to encourage this type of... I don't want to say white identitarianism. I would just say it's identitarian language. He thinks it's positive and helps his political career, which is a good thing for us. Now for L.K. Rourke. Final question. He said, he talked about his giving a statement on AI so good. I'll say he's probably going to get mad if I don't name him. So Nomad Tarot has given a statement on AI so good I can do better than to quote him. AI is basically a fun little toy that spits out complex copy-paste. It's got next to zero economic input outside of entertainment. Really hilarious that people think it's 2 seconds away from being Shodan and solving all the world's problems, nuking the world. I use ChatGPT almost all the time, and it's trivially, comically easy to get it to spit out nonsense. For someone so cynical, how do you still put so much faith into this farcical emerging technology? Well, that's because most of our economy is, and many companies are relying on AI to, instead of a lot of this entry-level work, they're relying on AI now. And a lot of even tech companies are relying on stuff that they would have brought in Indian H-1Bs for. They're now relying on AI to do that type of coding. So for us, for our basic use, if our basic use is to try to get entertainment and create stupid questions and to manipulate the platform, we would think it's useless and pointless. But for companies, they're using it for different reasons rather than entertainment and copy-paste. So I do think that people are correct that it's not going to solve all the world's problems and nuke the world, but increasingly our economy is heavily reliant on AI, and companies are building models around AI. Entertainment industry is completely changing its models due to AI. They're laying off tons of their a lot of their animators and special effects people because they're going to rely more on AI. So that's one of the effects that AI is doing. So it's not just ChatGPT with it. I think we could think of it as like trivial and comical, which I don't use AI, but a lot of our economy does. It might be a hyped up bubble, but it's not going to be something that's going to turn out to be complete snake oil, to use another term we've been using a lot in this podcast. I think it's going to be something that it's already transforming our economy. Now, to what extent we can question that and wonder about that. I think that Elon, who thinks that like it's going to end work as we know it, I think that's wrong. But it's going to be a major technological innovation. It's going to impact how we handle our national security, how we consume entertainment. Think about this: like boomers are a lot of their entertainment is AI now. What they see on Facebook is all AI. And you might say, well, that's comical and whatever, but that's like a major thing. Now just think about like all these companies that are relying on it. But I think there's going to be limits on it. I think that some people are hyping it up a bit too more. I would agree with that, but to say it's going to be trivial, comically easy to spit and have no economic utility, I think that's mistaken. It's already shaping, transforming our economy and making a big impact on it. So I usually conclude on L.K. Rurik, but I forgot Deuteronormative's question. So we're actually going to end on him. And he's putting out a Harvard poll shows a significant reduction in support among the youth for both socialism and democratic socialism. How do we reconcile this with the Democrats' record low in party approval? Is it really just single issue anti-Zionist? No, it's not. I don't know if it's single issue. I just think it's that Zoomers don't really care as much about politics and political labels as millennials and others in the past. Is that a lot of times they support socialist economic policy. I mean, they support economic wealth redistribution and other things, but they don't like the term socialism and democratic socialism. And so support for capitalism has also declined. So here's some of the figures. In 2018, 43% of young people supported capitalism. Now it's 39%. In 2018, 39% of young people supported democratic socialism. Now 29% supported. And 31% supported socialism. Now 21% supported. I think that they just don't like political labels as at all. So it's not that capitalism is replacing it. They just don't like the term socialism and democratic socialism. I bet if you said populism, they would be much more in favor of it. I think that they don't like ordinary political labels and they're just not into it. But if you look at their voting patterns and even their views on economic wealth redistribution and taxes and other things, it does show that they support a lot of socialist policies. So it's not like they're turning to support for capitalism, even though a lot of the younger guys are kind of turning to the most reckless forms of capitalism by getting into crypto and the rug pull elements in crypto and sports betting and drugs and some of the more unsavory aspects of capitalism and trying to make a quick buck or drop shipping and stuff like that. Even though the tariffs really it took a blowtorch to drop shipping. It's just that they don't like any of the parties. I think they're much more politically apathetic and a lot more apolitical than millennials are. But when they vote for somebody, it's voting for some populist. They're not turning to capitalism. So that is my views on that. And that is it for Highly Respected today. We're going to have more great content coming up this week, so be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.